Would you like to learn about some Dracula film and theater history today? Perfect. Picture this. The year is 1977. It's just before Halloween, and Dracula is printed all over Broadway. At this point in time, the last production of Dracula on Broadway was when Bela Lugosi starred in the role. But now you may be asking yourself, how did we get to this point? Well, let's travel back in time a little bit. Florence Stoker, the wife of Bram Stoker, commissioned a theatrical adaptation of her late husband's 1897 novel. According to historian David J. Schall, this was part of Florence's copyright crusade against F.W. Murnau's illegally adapted film Nosferatu. This theatrical version was written by Hamilton Dean and premiered in Derby, England in 1924. In 1927, it premiered in London for the first time. Following its success in England, the producer Horace Liverwright hired producer John Balderston to actually rewrite the play for the American stage. And in 1927, it premiered at Broadway's Fulton Theater, starring Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Then, in 1931, it was adapted into film by director Todd Browning and was produced by Universal Studios. We then fast forward to 1973, where producer John Wolpe produced a stage version of this with the Nantucket Stage Company. Wolpe then reached out to artist Edward Gorey, who had never previously worked in theater, and asked him to design the set as well as the costumes, and Edward Gorey said yes. This production was then directed by Dennis Rosa and starred Lloyd Battista as Dracula. And after much anticipation, in 1976, producer Eugene Wolsk brings the Edward Gorey production to Broadway. In the fall of 1977, the production opened for limited engagement at the Wilbur Theater in Boston, starring Frank Langella as Dracula for the first time. And finally, on October 20th, 1977, Dracula first premiered at the Martin Beck Theater on Broadway, starring Frank Langella. I am a huge Dracula nerd, as many of you know, so I do have a playbill from the Martin Beck Theater of one of the performances that Frank Langella was in. I also have the cast pamphlet with a ticket stub from the April 12th, 1978 performance of Frank Langella as Dracula. This production was a raving success and took home Tonys for Most Innovative Production of a Revival, as well as Edward Gorey actually taking home a Tony for costume design. This production ran for 3 years on Broadway, with Raul Julia taking over Frank Langella's role when he left. And to be a dork again, I do have the cast pamphlet from the April 19th, 1979 production with Raul Julia, as well as the ticket stub. Here he is. Frank Langella went on to reprise his Dracula role in the 1979 film, just as Bela Lugosi had done previously. The remaining touring productions of this play starred Jeremy Brett as Dracula, as well as Jean Leclerc as Dracula 2. And I do have a cast pamphlet with Jean Leclerc as Dracula. There went on to be a West End production of this play that starred Terence Stamp as Dracula before it concluded. I also want to credit many of these stage photos to the legendary photographer Martha Swope. If you want to look at more of these photos, just go to the New York Public Library Digital Collections page. You will not be disappointed. And if you ever get the chance to visit the Edward Gorey house, there is an entire section in it dedicated to Dracula that includes some of the costumes, the designs, the set designs, and photos. It's a wonderful, wonderful trip if you can make it. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments if you'd like some more Dracula history.